All right, hello and welcome to Was Darwin Wrong? I'm a campus minister, Parnell.Mahoney, and I'm with our sponsors, our student groups for this event today, our Maranatha Christian Fellowship and International Student Outreach. And today's presentation is part 2, and it is Paleontology. Was Darwin wrong about it? And the subtitle is kind of, just a little teaser, billions of dead things buried in rock layers all over the earth. What does that tell us about the question of creation or evolution? Part 3 will be here tomorrow at the same time, 12:20, in the President's Room, and it will be on Was Darwin Wrong About Geology? Lots of time or lots of water. So we also welcome you to join us this week and any week at our campus house on the edge of Dinkytown for our, we had our second presentation last night at our dinner and Bible study, and we have our 5th presentation on Saturday night at our worship meeting, which everyone's welcome to, and that's at 7 p.m. at 315 10th Avenue Southeast in Minneapolis. And that's where we have a house church. So we have a flyer for that, the location and the time on the table outside the room. So you're welcome to grab one on your way out. Today, our speakers will present on, as I said, paleontology. And did I mention the topic on Saturday?
It's going to be the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, did I mention that? The Grand Canyon, a different view. So on Saturday night, the presentation that our speakers will be presenting, instead of a regular worship meeting, we will have praise and worship and some testimonies, but at 8 o'clock, we will begin with the Grand Canyon, a different view. And so they're going to talk about creation evidence in the Grand Canyon. And Dave and Mary Jo do tours in the Grand Canyon, showing those evidences on site. And so we're going to be able to take from that some exciting stories and pictures and their experience. So we're super excited about that on Saturday night as well. So why are we doing this presentation? Well, my story is helpful, I think. So I got into a Bible study on campus, and I started learning about the gospel, the good news of Jesus. And one day I encountered Jesus in my apartment, and he changed my life. I put my trust in him, and I started going to church. And then I didn't grow up that way. But on campus here, they said to me, evolution is not in the Bible. And I said, I'll have to take a second look. And I started looking into it, and I thought, you know what, you're right. All right, well, it was through believing the message of Jesus that I encountered him, and he changed my heart. I knew I was forgiven and knew I was going to heaven. And so I was like, I'm going to believe the Bible explicitly, and I'm just going to take it literally. And so I just switched. And then, we're on a college campus, so I said, okay, well, God, how about some physical science support? I can believe the narrative in Scripture, but it would be helpful for everyone else and for me to have the additional support. So shortly after that, we met the Nuttings at a ministry out in Colorado called Summit, and they would teach what they're teaching here out there, and we were very intrigued by it. So we started inviting them into this campus. And after these presentations, we hope that you will look at evolution in a new way and find that the evidence for special creation to be compelling, and the Bible. This presentation will be 1 hour. There'll be Q&A following. It is, again, available. It is being live streamed, as all 5 presentations are, through the QR code on the flyer, so they can be watched at your leisure from wherever you are. So a little bit about the speakers. Dave and Mary Jo Nutting were our former evolutionists who examined the scientific evidence and decided it was more compelling to believe in a creator that had done it all, a designer, done it through special creation. And so they had switched. They've both taught at the high school and college level. And Dave's from Grand Junction, Colorado. Mary Jo's from Mankato, Minnesota. And they have advanced degrees in geology and biology and mathematics. They are the founders and directors of Alpha Omega Institute and have been teaching creation science for over 40 years. And that is it. I think I covered the ground. So let's welcome Dave Nutting.
Okay. Thanks so much, Parnell.
Good to be with you again, and the people out there zooming in on us. Okay, that's great. But anyhow, we're going to be talking about, was Darwin wrong about the fossil record? And subtitle, Billions of Dead Things Buried in Rock Layers, Laid Down by Water All Over the Earth. Okay, we do see that. Interesting. Most of us are taught in public school, some other schools as well, that the fossil record takes a big bite out of what the Bible has to say and basically destroys the whole idea of what the Bible teaches because it goes death and struggle a long time before Adam and Eve were ever around, if they were even ever around, they'll say. And so we're going to look at that a little bit. I was actually taught that evolution was a fact, and in fact, this is a picture of me when I was about 10 years old, teaching on a television program in Grand Junction, Colorado, and I was teaching how the fossil record, the rocks, and the dinosaurs, etc., proved evolution. I can already teach it at that age. Why? Because that's all I had ever been taught. I never heard there was any other explanation, say, for the fossil record, okay? It's all I ever heard was evolution, so I bought it, of course. And it wasn't until Mary Jo, my wife, found this interesting book for 5 cents in a secondhand bookstore. Evolution, the fossils say no. And that I was teaching, and both of us were teaching at the college level at that point in Alaska. And I looked at that cover, and it's amazing I didn't throw it away because I knew evolution was a fact. At least I thought it was, okay? And I thought this guy's got to be crazy, but interesting miracle, you might say. I read the book. Mary Jo read it from her background in biology, mine and from geology. And we finally realized that he may have a good point. And if he does, we better start doing our own research and finding out what the truth really is. And later, there's an updated version, Evolution of the Fossils, still say no, okay? And then a third edition, similar as that as well. As I started doing the studying on my own, and Mary Jo as well, we ran into the idea of the worldviews. There is a worldview called naturalism. And that particular worldview says everything in the universe can be explained by only natural processes without a God. When you actually look at that, you realize, wait a minute, everybody have been chained to this in their public school classrooms. You hear frequently, you can't be a good scientist unless you believe in evolution, or if you accept the idea of naturalism. And so it turns out that naturalism is a worldview. It might call it a philosophy of how we got here on planet Earth. Evolution is the pillar of naturalism, and naturalism and evolution is really not science. Wow. Okay? It's a philosophy posing as though it were science. And again, the pillar of naturalistic worldview, that is what is taught in schools, not only here in the United States, but also around the world. And I'll just demonstrate that a little bit about its being a philosophy. Here is a quote from one of the guys pushing the idea that naturalism has to be the way. It says, Dr. Scott Todd says, even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded from science. Because why? It is not naturalistic. Do you understand the box the students are being put in? If you don't believe in naturalism, they'll say, you can't be a scientist. Well, I believe you can be. All right? And we're going to look at it. You know, Darwin published his book on the origin of the species in 1859, okay? The question is, was he wrong about the fossil record? Well, I'm going to tell you one thing, that he was right about the fossil record. You ready? He says, geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chains, and this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. So he was right. The fossil record did not support his theory. Okay? Okay, now, he had an explanation, though. His explanation was, as I believe, he says, in the extreme imperfection of the fossil or geologic record. His idea was keep digging. And if you don't find those fossil links, you can reject my theory, basically. Okay? Well, here's 120 years later. We have Niles Eldredge writing, 120 years of paleontological research later, it has become abundantly clear that the fossil record will not confirm this part of Darwin's predictions, nor is the problem a miserably poor record. In fact, we have billions of fossils now, okay? Over 1 billion, but not enough to support evolution. He says the fossil record simply shows that this prediction of Darwin is wrong, okay? I'm going to give you 3 reasons here real quickly why the fossil record supports the Bible, the creation, the fall, the flood that is described in that Bible, but offers devastating evidence against the Darwinian evolutionary theory. Okay, ready? Here we go. You should expect, if evolution is true, when you look in the rock layers were put down by sedimentary layers, most of them, not all, some volcanics, you should see in those layers a record of constant change from very simple life forms to way at the bottom, not complex, but getting more and more complex as those layers increase or in depth and all the way to the top, where we finally have people on the scene looking down on the fossil record, okay? And so you should have, if that was the case, that constant change should be evident. Number 2, you should see all kinds of links, not 1 or 2, you should see billions of links showing how one thing evolved into another, and preserved now in the rock layers if all those millions of years are true. And again, the lowest life forms should be simple. Well, let's look at that last claim. Are they simple when you look at the geologic record? Let's look into the very bottom layers. What do you see? Distinct kinds, for sure. Well, distinct kinds is what you would expect if the biblical record is true, because God created things after their own kind. And if the rock layer is a record instead of layers put down by the flood as described in the Bible, then no matter where I look in the fossil record, I'm going to see extreme complexity, because God created things with complexity in order to relate to each other and to the environment, okay? And so we would also see things kind of staying put. Not enough change for the evolutionary, gradual changes over millions and millions of years. All right, so when we look at the fossil record, what are we going to look at? We are going to see an extreme evidence of the creation, the fall, and the flood. All right, and so look, for instance, one animal that you find way down deep in the fossil record are trilobites. Trilobites should be simple, but they're not. They're extremely complex. Let's look at one of them. There's the expanded version. You see the eye? You have hundreds of lenses focusing an image to one point, don't you? So what are you seeing? Extreme complexity. way down deep in the fossil record. Now in the Cambrian, they have found eyes of another sort. They are preserved because of the calcite in the lenses, okay? And now when you see these eyes, you say, wait a minute, these aren't trilobite eyes, but they're another type of eye that look just like a fly eye, okay? Wow, it's clear down in the Cambrian. And in fact, they didn't find one, they find literally thousands of them in this layer of eyes. They're extremely complex. According to the reports here, their discovery reveals that some of the earliest animals possess very powerful vision. Similar eyes are found in many living things and insects, such as robber flies. But do you know what they say? It's no way it can be a robber fly eye, even though it looks just like it. There's no way. Why? Because according to the theory of evolution, insects hadn't evolved until multiple millions and millions of years later. But what do you see? The eyes, they look just like robber flies, but they can't be. They didn't evolve yet. Well, maybe their assumptions are wrong in this particular case. All right, now, they've also found clear down in the Cambrian arthropod, and they were able to scan it and find a brain image. It's identical to the arthropods today with extreme complexity. And what's it saying in this particular article here? The only way to become fossilized is first to get rapidly buried. Rapidly, can you think of any event in history that could rapidly bury not only these, but billions of dead things and rock layers all over the earth? And they're all laid down by water. It could be a flood, couldn't it? All right, we're going to be looking at that too. But in the Cambrian, here's something else that is found. It's called the Cambrian explosion. And this is out of evolutionary museums. And what do you see? They are telling you that 554 or 45 million supposed evolutionary years ago, there was an explosion of life, and all the different body shapes and plans suddenly popped into existence. That doesn't sound like slow and gradual Darwinian evolution, does it? No, all of a sudden you see extreme complexity way down deep in the fossil record. So that is actually referred in the evolutionary circles as the Cambrian explosion of life, okay? So what do we see? Complexity, even in the lower layers. Now, what about this idea of things staying put, the stasis idea? Well, there's a shell you can pick up on the beaches today, and its fossil counterpart below it, no changes, okay? In 5 million years, okay? Here's a sassafras leaf and its fossil counterpart, no changes whatsoever. Pine cones, way down deep in the record, are still pine cones. They find fossil mites again in amber, supposedly of the age of the dinosaurs, but we have the same one living today. Exactly the same. Dragonflies and fossil ones, they're the same. Okay, there's not any difference there. All right, and then according to evolution, the four-footed creatures took a long time developing from the amphibians, right? Or amphibians developed from fish that grew legs. But now they're having to rewrite the whole thing here. Here is a trackway that was found, reported here. This is in May of this year. Okay, there's the trackway. What does it say? Earliest tracks recalibrate the timeline of tetrapod evolution. Why? Because that's a four-footed creature crawling around before they were supposed to have evolved. So there's an issue going on here, right? And it's not the first time, according to this other article on the bottom, it's not the first time they've upset the apple cart for evolution. Again, actual science data, recalibrating the timeline. Now they're finding spiders way down deep in the fossil record too. And here's one here. This is the 2023 report. In 2019, there was another report there, and it actually was able to show that these particular spiders had reflective eyes. Interesting. Preserved nicely in the fossil record. And when you look at that, you say, we have the same spider living today. And I better get off that. Not everybody likes spiders, right? Oh, here's another spider. Oh, my. This is a golden orb spider that was found, and they're saying this has been unchanged stasis for what? 165 supposed evolutionary years. Okay? Now, I say supposed or evolutionary years because I don't believe those millions of years could possibly exist. I don't think so. I don't see evidence for it. I see evidence against that as well. How do you preserve spiders for those millions of years with reflective eyes? And then there's soft tissue being found in all kinds of different fossils that certainly couldn't have been preserved for millions and millions of years. We're going to mention a few of those in a little bit, okay? Talking about spiders, they've now found spider webs clear down in the Silurian in the geologic column, way down deep. Spider webs. Wait a minute, what were those things trying to catch? Actually, according to evolution, insects didn't evolve for another 100 and some million years, right? Wait a minute, those spider webs weren't trying to catch each other, probably. They're trying to catch insects. And that fits with the complex eye, what looks like a robber fly, clear down in the Cambrian, okay? Now, we don't find spider webs with insects in them yet, okay? But they're there, all right? Now, when you study fossil insects, it's like studying living insects today. We see the same thing. You find roaches, dragonflies, you find bees, other type of insects. And one person put it this way, fossil insect study is the same as studying what we have right now. Okay, Denver Museum, here's an interesting display about sharks. And right from their museum, the first sharks evolved 450 million, I've added that word, evolutionary years ago. Then they said sharks have changed very little over the years. Well, don't you think you should see major changes over 450 million years if those millions of years were real? And we don't, okay? We don't see it. Now they found a living shark that was the same as what you find in the fossil record, supposedly 450 million years ago. It's the same, it was still living. Living fossils also negate the idea of all of those millions and millions of years because this is an identical thing. All right, now they found vertebrate fish way down in the Cambrian. Now, interesting thing about it is that this particular fish was found in 2014. It's a vertebrate. It had advanced eyes, blood vessels, gills, a digestive system, and muscular swimming. What does it look like to you? A fish. It's a fish. But it also shows complexity way down in those rock layers, and things are staying put because we have a similar fish to that today. Okay? The coelacanth was thought to have been extinct for about 65 million years. Now, according to the coelacanth, what they originally evolved 450 or 420 million years ago. But there's a problem. It's unchanged. We don't see any change between the fossil record and the living coelacanth. They used to say that that forelimb of the particular coelacanth was a proto-leg. Now that's an evolutionary loaded term. Proto-leg means on its way to becoming a leg. You see the assumptions there already? But when they looked at living coelacanths that they found swimming off the coast of Madagascar and were able to video, you know what they found out? That proto-leg looks rather fishy. It's not being used as a leg, it's used as a fin instead. Find woodpeckers in the fossil record. They're 100% woodpeckers. And in fact, you don't have to use your imagination to know when you're seeing a fossil feather. They're preserved in some of the real fine layers. Then they found bats, but they now found over 1,400 fossil bats. The interesting thing, according to this particular museum director, he says there are no intermediate stages between bats and insectivores, and there should be lots of links. There's none. They're 100% bats, and we know them today, okay? Also, they're finding fossil hummingbirds, and this one says it's a hummingbird, okay? There's no difference. He says the amazing thing about this fossil is that it's essentially a modern hummingbird. And then he says, my mind is a little blown. These are evolutionists talking about it. And then I love their humor here, where the whole hovering tribe of hummingbirds came from remains up in the air. I love it. They've found now fossil lizards in amber, 100% lizards, and in fact, we know what it probably ate. Why? Because we have the same species living today. And this is supposedly the age of dinosaurs, and we still see lizards, unchanged. Okay, so what are we saying? Stasis, not change. There's not enough change to allow for the millions and millions and millions of years of supposed evolution, okay? The idea of distinct kinds. According to the biblical record, God created things after their own kind, stated 10 times in the book of Genesis, basically not one kind changing into another kind. And that's a big problem for evolution if that's what we see. And we see, though, textbook pictures. You might have seen this when you were in 4th grade, okay? This is a picture. It shows how the a salamander-like creature is going to evolve into the mouse. Sounds really good. And the artwork convinces young people that evolution is true. But the problem is when you see this and these kind of drawings, you should nail them with it right now and say, wait a minute, hold on, that's artwork. It's great artwork, but what's the evidence? And when you actually look for the evidence, you can make a big X through all of the supposed links. Yes, you have the salamander-like creature. Yes, you have the mouse, but you don't have the creatures in between to show how it evolved. So the fossil record is not supporting the actual claims that are being made. Okay, let me quote a couple evolutionists saying that. David Kitts. He's even writing in the magazine called Evolution. He said evolution requires intermediate forms between species, but paleontology, the study of fossils, does not provide them. Wow, did you know that? Doesn't provide them, they're not there. Here's Arrow White, specializing in fish. He said this, but whatever ideas authorities may have on the subject. The lungfishes, that was your great-great-great-granddaddy according to evolution, okay? The lungfishes, like every other major group of fishes, have their origins firmly based on, what's that word? That's right, nothing. Nothing leading up to the fish. And he said, as an evolutionist, he said, I've often thought how little I should like to have to prove organic evolution in a court of law. Why? The lawyer's going to tear him apart, right? He doesn't have the evidence for it. All right, this is Dr. Stephen Jay Gould, very staunch believer in evolution and promoter of evolution, and used to ridicule creation, okay? And he said the extreme rarity of transitions in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The trade secret. Don't tell anybody. No. Why are the transitions so rare? Maybe we're looking at created kinds, not evolutionary changes. That makes sense to you? Okay, so what are we finding? We see all of these things, the constant change in evolution would require lots of links in the fossil record, and the lowest life forms, very simple. Every one of them is no, all those predictions. But what do we really see in the fossil record? You see distinct groups of creatures. Some variation, lots of difference between dogs, right? Little dogs, big dogs, spotted, not so spotted. Horses, frogs, but they are within their own group. You see variation, but you don't see one group changing into another group whatsoever. And you don't find any links leading up to those things. That's what it says, Book of Genesis, 10 times. God created things after their own kind. So every one of the predictions that say a creationist like me might say about the fossil record, you see complexity everywhere. Yeah, yep. Things staying put, not the kind of change you would be required if evolution is true. Yep. And distinct kinds. That's what we see. And so that fits, doesn't it? But you might say, wait a minute, hold on. I've seen lots of pictures in textbooks showing evolution. That's right. You saw pictures. You saw great artwork, because that's what's in those textbooks. And like, for instance, you can go to the museum. They even had this display right here in Minneapolis, okay? And you show how the dawn horse supposedly evolved into modern present-day horse over 60 million years. A little guy called Eohippus, okay? But the interesting thing, first of all, Eohippus should not be called hippus or horse, okay? Why? Because his correct scientific name is Hyracotherium. Okay? We have living Hyracotherium today. It's about the size of a rabbit. How would you like to put a saddle on that beast? Not going to get very far, are you, Parnell? Nope, no. And then there are other things wrong with the horse series, too. The number of ribs go back and forth without any pattern whatsoever. There's a problem with the toe and foot structure that doesn't do this, or doesn't support the evolutionary idea. And how do you go from a browsing tooth to a grazing tooth, leaving no transitions in the fossil record? All of these things are wrong. Now, there's one real kicker for horse evolution, one problem. They've now found the bones of present-day horse in rock layers at and even below his supposed ancestors. That is both in the John Day country in Oregon and also now in South America. Okay? You can't be your own grandmother. Okay? Because your supposed ancestors are found above you. It's a problem. Okay? So keep all this in mind when you see this great artwork in textbooks. Make sure you ask the question, what's the evidence? Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. This is a picture right out of a textbook. What are you seeing? Artwork. You're not seeing evolution, you're seeing an artist's concept, aren't you? So what question would you ask when you see that great artwork? What's the evidence? What is the evidence for this transition that you are seeing? Nothing. Now, one scrap of evidence was found in between those at the time that book was written. But look what they actually said in that book. Missing links show how the process took place. How can something missing that has never been found show anything? We have a real problem there, don't we? Well, since that book was written, they have now had about 7 different candidates for the transition from the fish to the amphibian. Every one has fizzled. The latest one was Tiktaalik, which was found in the northern regions of North America. And they said this about Tiktaalik: it had thick wrist bones. Time out, they were fin bones. Why are you calling them wrist bones unless somebody's trying to convince you of evolution, right? Okay, so they talk about it. The problem is it was actually used in a debate against one of the creationist speakers, Ken Ham, in a televised debate. And Bill Nye, the science guy who was debating Ken Ham, should have known better, because years before he even used that as a transition, they had already debunked it. And the reason? Because they were finding trackways of a 4-footed creature in Poland clear below the supposed layer that Tiktaalik was from. So now you have 4-footed creature leaving tracks in the mud before 4-legged creatures supposedly evolved. Okay, that is a problem. And I mentioned this other trackway too. That was in May of 2000, this year, May of 2025. Again, upsetting the apple cart of evolutionary assumption here. Now, when you go to museums or pick up textbooks, even at the university, they will be showing you how a whale evolved from a dog-like creature. Okay? And this is out of the NOAA, the government. Grade 4, lesson 4. What are they trying to show you? Evolution of this dog-like creature with slow and gradual changes over millions of years produced that whale. Most kids can actually look at that and say, that doesn't make sense. Okay? And I think they're right on, right? It doesn't make sense at all. But when they see the whole lineup, they say, I wonder if that's true. And so they get taken captive by evolutionary philosophy very frequently. Okay, well, let's look at the lineup. What about that first guy in the lineup? Here is a museum exhibit. You say, hey, great artwork. What's the evidence? All you found at that point was 2 small shreds of a jaw put together with white matrix, by the way. So it's only the dark part that was found. They didn't find any other bones at that point. Is that enough evidence to get that great creature and put the picture in a museum that convinces kids that that was the ancestor? No. I think it's rather deceptive myself. Okay, now let's go up the line. Next one up the line, Pakicetus. This was found on the front cover of Science magazine, April 1983. Right on the front cover. And wow, kids should look at that, or adults as well, should look at that and say, what? Great artwork. What's the evidence? At the time that magazine was written, what was the evidence for that? Well, there you see it, and you see another publication as well carrying a similar picture. The evidence, one bone at the back of the head, and one piece of jaw and a couple other little teeth. That's all. Now look at the claim they have on the article that convinces young people of evolution. Bones prove whale walked. Hold it. Do you realize they didn't find any backbone, no tail, no legs? How can something without any legs prove anything walked? You got a real problem, right? So make sure you ask that question, what's the evidence? Well, that was back in 1983. Now they have more evidence of what they're calling Pakicetus. And here's what they think now Pakicetus might have looked like. Which is the correct model then, the 1983 model or the 2004 model? In other words, will the real Pakicetus please stand up? Which one was it? All right. Point is, there's a lot of artwork and a lot of assumption going into a lot of these museum and textbook displays. This is Ambulocetus. And you know, enough people have been asking, what's the evidence? Well, in here, for Ambulocetus, they put the whole skeleton. Aha, right? They have the evidence. There it is, and sure enough, that's what they have. The problem is, when you ask what's the evidence for that artwork, even what's the evidence for that museum display of all those bones, you might be surprised. Because, first of all, you see that whole skull? You see that whole skull? The skull was actually sent to museums and classrooms around the world. And so they figured they had the whole skull, but they didn't, okay? And in fact, on videotape, you have one of the guys that's pushing the Ambulocetus whale evolution, Hans Thuysen. He actually admits on tape that they didn't find the whole skull. And in fact, look at that part of the skull right here. Notice that this section on the front, which would include the blowhole, which would be a good identifier for being a whale evolution, is all missing. And here's all of the bones they found, and that is it. Is that enough evidence? Look at that. The museum is leading you to think they had the whole thing. Correct? They didn't. The models that are in classrooms around the country shows a complete skull. They don't have it. All right? And so they're being led captive by a philosophy of evolution. Notice philosophy, not science of evolution. The philosophy of it. Don't be led captive, according to the biblical Colossians 2:8. See to it, no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception. Okay, so much for Ambulocetus. What about Rhodocetus? Their claim is it's the first creature with legs changing into flippers and a tail developing into a whale's tail. That's a great claim. The problem is they didn't have flippers and they didn't have a tail. Not in the fossils. It wasn't preserved. All right. You know, one of the things I was taught when I was younger is that there are some little bones in this section of the whale that's red circled here, and those are vestigial or leftover legs from evolution. That's just a big assumption, isn't it? And it was the assumption here that those were leftover legs that caused a lot of people to believe in evolution. Turned out, finally, the researchers realized, hold on, this long accepted evolutionary assumption is now turned on its head. And this is not a creation publication. Okay, the University of Southern California news release. Okay, this is in 2014. Okay, what's going on here? That really makes a big problem for evolution. But now they found out what those little bones are, and maybe little bigger bones sometimes. They found out what they're for. You know, these things are mammals. And one of the things you need for a mammal reproduction, you've got to have bones to anchor, muscles for live birth, don't you? And also they're finding out it's very important in the reproductive process to begin with, okay? So all of this stuff now turns a long accepted evolutionary assumption on its head. What about the idea that dinosaurs evolved into birds? We see that all the time, don't we? We hear that in museums. We see it in textbooks. That's what they're pushing right now. In fact, National Geographic has that particular feathered theropod on their front cover. And that's sad, isn't it? Did they really find evidence of feathers and scales turning into feathers? Turns out, no. In fact, right inside of their magazine, they do show you this fossil, but turns out they show you feathers. Wait a minute, when you see a woodpecker feather, it looks like a woodpecker feather, doesn't it? Is that a feather, or is it just some carbonaceous film? Turns out that's all it is. But anyhow, this is the fossil that they found, that they said they found, and this is the drawing that they made. I think that artwork is actually taking a little liberty here, okay? And by the way, this particular fossil turned out to be a hoax. Did you catch that? It wasn't true. It is actually a composite of 5 different fossils put together by a Chinese resident and sold to a museum. And I guess they made a lot of money doing it. And they're finding out, hey, people are buying these things. So there are other hoaxes have come out as well. Here is the article that you find, a turkey-sized discovery connecting birds and dinosaurs may be a composite. How do they know that? Because somebody was doing the research. And they found out they had, you know, on a fossil, you have the one that you got on the bottom, but you also have the upper relief. The upper relief was totally different. Totally different. And they found out that it was a hoax as a result of that. All right, now that's the first one. All right, now Storrs Olson, it was a bird expert at the Smithsonian Institute. First of all, when they put that picture on the front cover of National Geographic and some of the other pictures they have, Storrs Olson actually, an evolutionist himself, I believe, accused National Geographic of engaging in sensationalistic, unsubstantiated tabloid journalism. That isn't a link, he's saying. Okay, he said clearly, the magazine, National Geographic, is not receiving competent consultation in certain scientific matters. And then the reporter says, he's especially maddened by, or galled by, the Society's assertion that a wide variety of dinosaurs definitely wore feathers. This is just a, let's say, blankety-blank lie, he says. There is not one undisputed example of a dinosaur with feathers. None. The public deserves to know this. He's ticked. Okay? He really is. Another one that is ticked is Alan Fiducia, University of, I think, North Carolina. And basically he said this: when they put that feathered dinosaur on the cover last year, I threw 30 years worth of magazines out of my house. He is ticked. He said the hair-like filaments that accompany some fossils come from beneath the skin. They're not coming from scales, okay? It says, I can duplicate the effect by skinning the tail of a modern lizard. All right? Okay, this is what the experts are actually saying. Another one of those that were actually being promulgated as a link was from Kevin Padian from the University of California at Berkeley. It turned out it was a pterosaur with a tail from some fossil deposit where Archaeoraptor was found. That's the one that was already shown to be false, okay? And the tail was added by a local resident before selling it to a Chinese museum. All right, so that one fell out of the sky too. Now, National Geographic actually had this particular picture, and it was showing the path to birds. Here's the evolutionary path. These theropod dinosaurs, the legs got more and more hairy, turned into feathers, and eventually became the wing. And the creature now evolved from a theropod to a flying bird and took off and flew. Sounds good, doesn't it? And this kind of artwork convinces young people, doesn't it? And many of us adults as well. First of all, this is all artwork. That's artwork. And you say, what's the evidence, okay? And notice the order. It looks like this is the order that the theropod dinosaurs are evolving in. But that wasn't the order. When you actually look at the fossils, what order, when did they find these things? My artists at AOI took it apart and put it into the proper order. And sure enough, you have birds flying around today. But you go back in time and say, oh, wait a minute, hold on. You have birds down here before some of the dinosaurs. Oh, hold on, these are called Mesozoic kiwi birds. All right? And now you have birds flying around even before his supposed great-great-great-granddaddy. Okay? That is a big problem for evolution, isn't it? Huge problem. And so what do you end up with? Tear it apart, study the evidence, and you might come up with a completely different interpretation. Okay? And that's what we're seeing. You can't be your own grandmother, can you? That's a problem for evolution right there. But what are the evolutionists saying? That is pushing it. No problem, says Kevin Padian at the University of California, Berkeley. We don't always get everything in the fossil record in perfect order. He doesn't acknowledge the problem, and it's a big one, okay? All right, so can you imagine a T-Rex or any theropod dinosaur evolving into a hummingbird? They're very different. I'm going to demonstrate one thing for you right now, or you're going to demonstrate it, one problem with bird evolution. I want you to take a deep breath on the count of 3 and hold it. 1, 2, 3. Now, on top of that, don't let the air out yet. Take another deep breath and hold it. Now do that another time. One more. Yeah, you gave up. Okay. You're demonstrating a difference between your lung and any bird lung. The bird lung has a continuous flow of oxygen, let's say like a hose going around. So it's very important for birds to be able to sustain flight, to have lots of oxygen. So the bird has a continuous flow system where your lung system is a dead end system. Air comes in and goes out the same tube. Not so with the bird. It's a very different system. Yes, the air goes in, it goes through some storage sac, comes out the same area, but it's a whole different system. How do you go from a hose system to a dead end system without shutting down everything and starting over? That's a big problem for evolution, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so did dinosaurs evolve into birds? There's the theropod dinosaur. Did it evolve into those gorgeous scarlet macaques we see in Costa Rica when we take tours for people there? All right. Well, actually, no. They have now found a theropod dinosaur with 3 birds in its stomach. They were true birds. These guys weren't evolving into birds, they were eating them, okay? But did you know that they have now found fossils of modern birds, sandpipers? Well, hold on, where are they going to be found? In dinosaur rock layers, way down below in the Jurassics, right? In dinosaur layers, they found birds like sandpipers, loons, ducks, flamingos, cormorants, albatross, parrots, owls, penguins, robins, and also mammals that weren't supposed to be there, but they're now found in the dinosaur layer. Opossum, hedgehogs, snakes, boa constrictors, salamanders, lizards, etc. You don't see that in the museum. They usually will show a nice orderly progression. They won't show you a bird found in the dinosaur layer, okay? They won't see it. Now they're finding soft tissue, red blood cells, DNA strands as well. Where are they found? All in where? Dinosaur layers, okay? And they're finding in dinosaur bone. When I was a kid at about 15 years old, I used to cut and polish a lot of petrified dinosaur bone, okay? And by the time I was actually 15, I found the dinosaur remains of two different skeletons. And I was going to be a paleontologist specializing in dinosaurs until I found out you couldn't use a bulldozer to get them out. Okay? I can't stay on the tedious work. But anyhow, what's going on here? When I was grinding on one of these bones to polish it, cutting it, making jewelry like belt buckles, bolo ties. Once in a while, I would all of a sudden get a rotten egg smell. What could that be from? Rotting tissue. How can you possibly preserve rotting tissue for 140 million years? That just negates those millions of years. It is a major issue for evolution at that point. All right, so maybe you have some ideas. A biofilm, no, that's been proven wrong. All the things that have been suggested have been proven wrong. Not only in dinosaur, now they're finding, and this is in an arthropod that was found, soft tissue, supposedly 500 million years old. Still soft tissue? Forget the millions of years, okay? And that was in 2019, Nature magazine. You can list hundreds of fossils that have now been found with soft tissue, which is an enigma for evolutionary paleontology. Anyhow, they found soft, pliable skin now in dinosaur impression, not only impressions, but in dinosaur fossil discoveries. Pliable skin? Oh, by the way, look at that. Those are scales, aren't they? Do you see feathers? Nope, you don't. The idea, according to evolution, is that scales evolved into feathers. But when you look at it, especially when you examine it under high magnification, you find all the hooks and barbules of a feather, everything. The origin is from a different part of the creature. It is not from the scale. Scales did not evolve into feathers, in other words, okay? And if you want more information, I'll give you some great references that'll show you that, okay? That's one of them right there. And actually, it quotes a whole bunch of other articles, too, saying the same thing. Basically, birds are not dinosaurs, okay? Dinosaurs didn't evolve into birds at all. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Where did the dinosaurs come from? I'm adding a little extra on this. Is that okay, Parnell? Where did the dinosaurs come from, and where did they go? Did people see them? I gave a presentation on this last night, okay? And real quickly, I believe people actually saw these things. They called them dragons. And in fact, Marco Polo visited China in 1271 AD. He reported the emperor raised dragons to pull his chariots in parades. So they're big, weren't they? Then you go to certain formations in the southwest United States. I take students here to see what it's actually, this is lightened. So you can actually see what it looked like. But you find a brontosaurus type creature, now called a patasaurus, on the sandstone walls. You find this thing here that's basically Edmontosaurus. And we find that in the Havasu Canyon area of the Grand Canyon. And it's a dead ringer for this creature that they now put this as what they think it looked like in museum exhibits, okay? This is out of an Asian collection. You see clay figurine. It's a dead ringer for Bacher's oviraptor. Same creature. But this is in 1400 AD that somebody's actually must have seen one of those things. What are these guys hunting? When you look at it, they're hunting. This is in the Amazon River Basin. Yeah, that's a long-necked dinosaur right here. They're all after it. They're quite excited about it too, aren't they? Okay? Anyhow, what are these guys hunting? This is called from ancient Sumatra. They're hunting this thing. I think it's Big Bird from Sesame Street, if anybody ever saw that before. Okay, no, it's Cryptosaurus is what it is. Okay, now they have sauropod dinosaurs found on ornamental boxes from China. Look at that. These are actual long-necked dinosaurs, one on each side of this box, okay? Evidence of what? People having seen them. They know what they look like. And to think they just had a good imagination, probably not. Long-necked dinosaurs on a Mesopotamian cylinder seal, exactly like that particular dinosaur. This actually is a dinosaur right here on a column on a Hindu temple in Cambodia, right there. It's a Stegosaurus. And it's 1,000 years old, according to when they think that that temple was made. They have found clay figurines and other things in Mexico showing pteranodons and, stegosauruses, etc. All right, in 1496, Bishop Bell was entombed in Carlisle, England. What is this brass engraving that goes around this particular casket or tomb? It's a long-necked dinosaur, probably that one right there. Anyhow, there was a university presentation, Stanford University, by Stanford University instructor Adrian Mayer. And in fact, here's what some of the people at the university was saying about our professor. They're giving this presentation. And it's crazy what they're talking about. This professor links dinosaur bones to mythological creatures. Oh my. Well, what mythological creature is he talking about? Dragons and dinosaurs. I frequently go to the audiences and I ask, how many of you believe, and especially at a university, how many of you believe in dragons? Nobody. Maybe one put their hand up in their shirt and wave it a little bit, okay? But anyhow, do you really believe in dragons? Well, this one did. That's Stanford University, okay? But they found a new fossil called Dracorex is the name they made. Dracorex, look at the horns. These are the nubbins from the inside of the horn. The other part of the horn would be a lot bigger because that's like a cow horn. Basically what happens, you have the nubbin and then the horn emanates off of that. Okay, so what do you see? These are actual horns on this fossil. And somebody said, oh, maybe somebody saw the bones of this creature. Ah, that's where you get all the mythology of dragons. Well, yeah, maybe. But the problem is, where were these bones found and where are the drawings always found of Dracorex? The actual dragon that was used and was on the seal, it's been seen in Chinese artwork, etc. Found in China, medieval Europe. This was found in North Dakota, okay? The only one like it that was found, okay? Dracorex hogwartsia. That's an interesting name, but the kids named it, okay? It was great. All right, St. George got his fame killing dragons, by the way. Every one of the artwork, the pictures that you see, looks like a known type of dinosaur, but they call them the dragon slayer, okay? And we do have books like that. If you really want books, contact us at discovercreation.org, and we can supply you with some very important, interesting documentary on dragons or dinosaurs, or guide to dinosaurs showing the dinosaur-dragon connection as well. All right, the last thing I just want to mention, talk about artwork. Here it is. You see a picture like this in a textbook, right? Obvious, all over. What questions should the young people, should the adults be asking when they see the picture in their textbook? What's the evidence? That's right. What's the evidence? Let's look at that guy circled there on the lower left. What's the evidence for him? There it is. You see the skull and you see reconstruction, but they didn't find the whole skull. They didn't. All they have is the top of the skull or the skull cap. Okay? Not enough evidence to get that great artwork, right? Nebraska man. You see this picture right here. What was this one reconstructed? Supposedly proof for human evolution found in the state of Nebraska. What's the evidence? Okay, one tooth, the whole tooth, but nothing but the tooth. And that's all they had. Then that tooth later turned out to be a pig's tooth. It wasn't even human at all. And so there went that missing link, right? Piltdown Man was a hoax. Somebody took the skull of a modern man, put it together with the jaw of an ape, colored everything nicely, put it to where scientists would find. Sure enough, they found it, and then they ended up with this particular picture of Piltdown Man. It took them 30 years to prove it was wrong. It was a hoax. But it was still in textbooks 80 years later. Still in the textbooks. Once you get it into a textbook, it's hard to get out, okay? This is out of a second grade book used in Grand Junction, Colorado. And wow, what do they say? Rhompithecus was a man-ape, was not a real man. Great artwork. What's the evidence? Turns out all they had were two small scraps of a jaw at that time. And from that, they got Mr. Rhompithecus and his family. Again, stretching the evidence. Lucy, again, they found about 40% of a skeleton, and basically you look at the museum exhibits and they show you a nice complete head, hands, feet for Lucy. Problem, they didn't find any of this stuff. Notice, no hands, no head, no feet. Artwork convinces young people evolution is true, not the evidence. They now have found more evidence of Lucy and friends, and the French science journal says, guess what? We better take Lucy off of our family tree. Doesn't work. It's nothing but a monkey, an ape-like creature. All right, now this picture is Tim White makes this. This is in a textbook, and it's this is reconstruction of Afarensis skull. Hold on, what are they saying here? This skull is not everything that was found together. It was found and it was reconstructed using parts of several individuals. This is a composite. And now they get their idea what this Australopithecine looked like. All right? You can make a lot of errors when you do that, okay? Now, Time Magazine was reporting that this one shows a toe bone. And then notice the article. This toe bone proves the creature walked on 2 legs. Great. Where was it found? And they actually put it together with some other things too, and the skull fragments. But it turns out that this particular toe bone was found 10 miles away from the skull fragments. Assumed it was the same species, so let's put the composite picture together of what this creature would have looked like. All right, Ida, introduced in 2009. Another thing introduced into 2009 was Artie, 2 different fossils. And but both of these were reintroduced in what year? What year was Origin of Species published? 1859. What date is this? 150 years later. It was also, Ida was introduced February of that year to celebrate Charles Darwin's, what would have been, 200th birthday. Big to-dos, right? And unfortunately, they had museum unveilings, they had all kinds of videos, textbooks. They did that before they ever let any one of the people who know what they're doing in that field see the fossils. When they actually saw the fossil unveiled, so that's not a link, that's a lemur. We have the same thing living today. It's not a fossil link. And so they were upset. You should have seen the internet exchange going on back then when that was reintroduced. Artie, look at that whole skeleton, but they didn't find the whole skeleton at all. And you know what the researchers actually said about Artie? He said, these aren't bones we're putting together. It's more like putting together powder. You're going to put it together however you want. Besides that, when I first looked at it, I said, oh my, what long arms you have, Artie. Okay? It's a knuckle-walking ape if it's anything. Okay? But again, published in October, perfect timing to celebrate Charles Darwin's book. All right, so you see a new book, a new fossil on the block, okay? Newspaper articles. We found the link. This one came out in 2015. Just wait and see what they say 2 months later. What are they saying 2 years later? Okay, it turned out, when you wait and see, first of all, they're finding, as they discovered the bones, they had an indication of iodine deficiency. Many of the bones are broken in the same spots, and too many crushed skull fragments. And then it was actually looked like it was transported in. Okay, now the question is, what would fit that? It's maybe this is the hunted instead of the hunter, where the hunted would crush the skull and they would actually take the brains out of the monkey-like creature. Okay? This was the hunted. And same thing with the bones. A lot of people enjoy baking the big old arm bones or leg bones. What do they get out of it? Marrow. They love eating bone marrow. Some people do, and maybe that's what they did back then as well. So they've got a whole new picture, even of Homo naledi, okay? Okay, so good books for you. Contested Bones. Well, some of the latest on all these finds that we're talking about. Fossil Record by Dr. John Morris and Frank Sherwin. Again, showing the fossil record and what it actually says compared to what is being taught. All right, so the next time you see a new face on the block, and they say, this is your ancestry. Ask the question, what's the evidence, right? Not only that, you can ask the question, are these skulls composites? And really, can they get this picture from what you're looking at? Okay, all these skulls are composites, by the way, every one of them. Okay, so what do the fossils record actually indicate? Here it is, bottom line. We see complexity everywhere, yes. Things are staying put, we see distinct groups. We see evidence of rapid burial, like one fish eating another fish. I'll see that again tomorrow. But anyhow, what are we seeing? A lot of mud, fossils, buried in rock layers, put down by water in layers all over the earth. What do you, Can you think of any one event in history that can give you that amount of mud? There you go. One big flood. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about that flood. Geology. Who's the hero of the plot? Lots of time? Or was there a lot of water? We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Okay? So, go ahead. Time for questions.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
So, you had some of your own artwork today.
I did.
Yeah. What's the evidence?
Good point.
I beat everyone to it. You had the different figurines from South America.
I did.
It looked like clay, kind of.
Yeah, they were clay from
creations.
those were from Mexico.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
But it looked like, that picture looked like artwork. It didn't
It
look
was
like
artwork.
Okay. So
The
why-
picture of the brontosaurus on the sandstone wall was artwork.
Right,
The picture of Edmontosaurus at the Havasu Canyon, artwork.
right.
But the thing is, how did they get their artwork so closely resembling the reconstructions that modern paleontologists are doing? Unless they may have seen them.
What I'm saying is your picture looked like it was artwork.
Okay.
So the slides.
Oh, no, they weren't. They were actually right on the,
So that one of the.
the one that was lightened
Uh,
was actually from the actual thing. You can walk
I've seen the pictures, so I
and
know
see
there's
it.
an original, but
Huh?
I've seen the picture, I know there's an original, it looked like it.
Yeah,
was-
you've seen the original. We lightened it. I think I mentioned it. We lightened that so that you can see what it actually looked like. I sat on a rock right next to it, pointing it to people, and they said, there's no dinosaurs with people. I'm a teacher, and they've never found that. I said, what's that? Pointed right to the rock. This one way, and I guess the people back then had a great imagination. Oh, that's what she said.
Well,
She
that's
said the
all I
same.
have to say. You can go to other questions.
But there's the, and the Edmontosaurus, we saw what the museum exhibit would be.
Right.
And so basically, here's the idea about artwork. When it comes to some of the fossil supposed links, we don't find enough evidence to get all of that information. Okay? It's a whole creature from one scrap that's being done. But when you look at dinosaurs, I have actually stood right on the site where Supersaurus was being basically excavated. And I saw from the background, or the backbones, from here all the way to the back of this room, all laid out. They're still in the mud and shale and rock. And there it is. Now, when you get a fairly complete skeleton of a Apatosaurus or a Brontosaurus, okay, you can get a pretty good idea what he looked like. Because on some of those bones, you can actually see the muscle attachments, sinew attachments, etc. All right? You can actually take a Brachiosaurus and you can look at the muscle attachments and realize that long neck of a Brachiosaurus, big head, you can actually see where the ligaments with muscle are, and you find out that is actually designed like a modern crane for lifting. It's amazing when you actually look at that. Or you look at the sloping back and the structure, it's the same as a bridge structure of some of the bridges around the world. And again, you see design. But when you have enough Oh, just a second. I'll try to hear you. Sometimes, especially when I'm speaking, and my hearing aids don't work.
You're good. First I wanted to ask, I didn't catch your name.
What?
I didn't catch your name.
My name? Dave. Are you a journalist?
No?
Uh,
I just like to read.
I like journalists.
First, kind of thing that I caught up on, a lot of your sources for dinosaurs not having feathers are over 20 years old at this point. Are there any recent examples?
There is, I just was at a big conference last summer, I guess, showing dinosaurs with feathers, but they're not feathers. It's, the thing is, yeah, some of those, this is when it was first coming out. Okay, this is when it's first coming out. And this is what gets so many people, the evolutionary thing, that public way is so particular to me. Now, you, be careful, because now, they've now reclassified birds, and where they put it,
Reptiles.
Dinosauria. Bird. So if they find a complete bird, they now say, in the Jurassic, they said we found, here's a bird, here's a dinosaur, because it's underneath the Dinosauria. Here's a dinosaur with feathers. But it's a true bird. And so everyone that I've seen over these years has been a dinosaur with feathers has turned out to be true birds.
Okay.
That's what I've been able to see.
And you say that, like, you can't exist
Do
alongside.
you want this on tape? You got it, okay.
You say that you can't exist alongside your grandmother a lot, where, but.
You can't be your own grandmother.
Yeah, you can't be your own grandmother. In evolutionary theory, wouldn't it be suggested that the most successful species would continue on alongside its specialist species, regardless of changes in the environment?
I see what you're saying, that if it is, if it's already well designed, why change it?
Exactly.
And it might be preserved over long periods of time. Where did that design come from in the first place? Okay, we're not seeing the record being up to it.
Yes.
All right, and so we have that piece missing. But now you have this creature, and it carries on. You might see it in multiple layers. Okay, but like the horse series.
Yeah.
Okay, you find true horse. So before is supposed and nucleus deposits, putting pores in there, food for breathing, for air, circulating, all that stuff. And then the final thing is the egg, which at the very last, the next stage, goes out to where it's going to be laid. And it's actually, the little end is always going down first. Now, all of a sudden, 180-degree turn inside of that egg is a large egg instead of a small egg.
And I've heard the argument that those early stages of egg development where initial layers are formed around the zygote is evidence for the birth of early animals in water. And that the egg was only developed because, like the shell was only developed because they emerged onto land. And they needed to keep their young suspended in liquid in order to keep them developing.
What would be your answer then?
So there is my idea, but what's the evidence, you know?
Yeah.
If I was gonna create eggs, I'd probably create them as much similar as I could, you know? Some of them were birthed right in the water. Others need that protective shell, but the intricacy of that shell is just amazing when you see it under a microscope.
So you're,
It's like all these little, it comes on and it's like all these little granules. It's just beautiful.
right, yeah.
So the question always comes back to, well, how and why did that develop if it was by accident? I mean, how many eggs would be laid out on the ground and dehydrate before one of them accidentally got this magnificent shell structure by accident?
That's a very good question to ask. And I feel like
break, and now it crosses the break. So you get a broken system, and examples of binding of support erosion is broken. Well, design well, say, highly sophisticated system. Break the speed. Now it's functional here. Well, the rest of it, okay? Kind of is what I could see. So in other words, you take this resolution here. Somehow you already got the advanced state, but now you're breaking it. Now you're going backwards instead of forward.